I was secretly earning $500,000 when my wife asked for a divorce. She married my best friend. Imagine this, you've built everything, your life, your business, your trust in someone, and then, in a single moment, it all falls apart. What would you do if the person you trusted the most betrayed you? Well, I'll tell you what I did. Keep watching. Because the tables are about to turn in ways no one saw coming. And trust me, this is a story you won't forget. What happened next will shock you. I had always believed in building things that last. My career as an architect was proof of that. I spent every day designing homes, skyscrapers, and structures meant to withstand the test of time, each project more ambitious than the last. People saw my life as a well-constructed masterpiece, a perfect marriage, a thriving business, and a reputation as someone who had it all. But let me tell you something about illusions: they shatter in the blink of an eye, and what's left behind cuts deeper than anything I ever thought possible. Lauren had been the first piece of that perfect picture. She wasn't just my wife, she was the one who stood by me through all the late nights and sleepless hours as I built my firm from the ground up. She was beautiful, with golden brown hair that caught the light just right, and a smile that could make a man forget his name. But beyond her beauty, it was the way she supported me. She was my rock, or at least, that's what I told myself. She cheered me on when I pulled all-nighters, encouraged me when things seemed impossible, and made sacrifices alongside me. We built a life together, and I had promised her that life would be one of comfort and security. And damn it, I delivered. Our home reflected that promise: a sleek, modern estate in the heart of the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline. A fully stocked bar in the corner of the open-concept living room. Hand-picked furniture from high-end designers. The place had Lauren's touch. She decorated it herself, turning it into something you'd expect to see in a luxury magazine. To anyone looking in, it was perfect. But then, something changed. Lauren started to drift. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe it was stress, I thought. Maybe she was bored. She didn't have to work anymore, not with the way my income had grown. Over the past few years, I'd surpassed the $500,000 mark. She had all the freedom she could ask for. She could explore her passions, travel, take up hobbies. But instead of embracing that freedom, she became distant. Her smile grew rare, her touch colder. It was subtle at first, so I convinced myself I was overthinking it. But it didn't stop there. She started acting strangely: late-night phone calls, changes in her wardrobe, disappearing for hours without a word. Then came Eric Donovan. Eric was a friend, or at least, that's how I'd always thought of him. We met years ago at an industry event. He worked in real estate investments, and our paths crossed often enough that we had developed a mutual respect for each other. But recently, Eric had been around more than usual. His name slipped into our conversations, casual at first, but then more frequently. "Eric thinks this neighborhood is up and coming," she said one night at dinner, casually twirling her wine glass. Another time, it was, Eric suggested we try that new restaurant downtown. Maybe we should go sometime. I wasn't the jealous type. Hell, I pride myself on being level-headed. I trusted Lauren. But trust doesn't survive without honesty, and the way she spoke about Eric started to leave a sour taste in my mouth. Something was off. I noticed how she always kept her phone close, how she angled the screen away from me when I walked by. I saw how she hesitated before answering simple questions, as if carefully choosing her words. But I didn't confront her. Not yet. It wasn't until that night, when I walked through the front door, expecting nothing more than a drink and some peace after a long day, that the truth hit me. She was sitting at the kitchen island, scrolling through her phone, as if nothing was wrong. She barely glanced up when I set my keys down. "Hey," I said, my voice casual, but she didn't respond immediately. She just set her phone face down, took a deep breath, and then looked at me with an expression so neutral. It sent a chill through my chest. I want a divorce. 3 words, no hesitation, no warmth, just cold, calculated finality. I froze. Did I hear her right? Divorce? After everything we'd been through? After all those years, all the late nights, all the sacrifices? "Excuse me?" I managed to say, my voice calm despite the storm brewing inside me. "I want a divorce," she repeated, her voice colder this time, as if she had to spell it out for me. I should have been furious. maybe even devastated. But what I felt wasn't anger. It wasn't heartbreak. It was something far more dangerous, a dark, quiet clarity. Divorce. She wanted a divorce after everything? After all the time, effort, and love I had poured into this marriage? And I can't keep living like this, she added, crossing her arms. I need someone who actually works, who contributes. This isn't the life I signed up for. I blinked, stunned. Doesn't work? Was she serious? I almost laughed. For years, I'd worked my ass off to build my career, to make sure she had everything she needed. I'd given her luxury vacations, designer clothes, financial security. And now she was telling me that wasn't enough? I leaned against the counter, studying her, and for the first time, I saw her clearly cold. Self-assured, as if she had already made up her mind. All right, I said finally, my voice steady. She raised an eyebrow, clearly caught off guard. All right? Yes. If you want a divorce, I won't stop you. For a split second, I saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes, but it was gone just as quickly, replaced by that smug, self-satisfied smile I had come to dread. Good, she said, standing up. Because I've already spoken to a lawyer. You'll need to move out by the end of the month. Move out? The audacity. But I didn't argue. Not yet. Fair enough, I replied, turning to head upstairs. As I made my way up, I could feel her eyes on me, waiting for me to explode, waiting for me to beg. But I gave her nothing. Not a single word. Upstairs, I sat on the edge of the bed, letting it all sink in. This wasn't about divorce. It wasn't about us growing apart. It was about power. Lauren wanted to be in control, to paint me as the failure, to make herself look like the one who was leaving an unworthy man behind. She was wrong. She had no idea who she was dealing with. I didn't react right away. I didn't throw anything. I didn't scream. No, I didn't do any of that. It wasn't about anger anymore. It was something else. It was a strange, hollow clarity, like stepping back from a picture that had been hanging on your wall for years, only to realize that the frame was crooked the entire time. Divorce? Sure. You want a divorce? Fine. I would let her have it, but I wasn't about to make it easy for her. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. No, she didn't know it yet, but I was about to show her just how wrong she was. She thought she had all the power now, but it wasn't going to last. Not for long. That night, I barely slept. I could hear Lauren moving around downstairs. The occasional clink of dishes or the rustle of paper as she went about her business like nothing had changed. Maybe, in her mind, nothing had. But for me, the game had already begun. I wasn't going to confront her, no, that would have been too easy. She would expect that. She would get a thrill out of it. Instead, I waited. I observed. And while she went on with her life like nothing was happening, I was busy preparing. The wheels were turning. Slowly. Quietly. I had time. I had patience. She didn't know it yet, but she was already digging her own grave. And I was going to let her keep digging. The next few days were an exercise in control. Lauren began acting like she was in charge. It was in the little things, the way she started questioning every move I made, as if I were some errant employee, not her husband. The way she criticized the smallest things, how I folded the laundry, how I made my coffee. She was looking for something to make me snap, to make me beg her to stay, but I wasn't about to give her that satisfaction. Not now. Not after everything. I watched as she spoke more about Eric, slipping his name into every conversation like it was nothing. Eric thinks this neighborhood is going to take off, she said one night as we sat at the dinner table. I didn't even look up from my plate. Eric suggested I take a trip to Napa, to clear my head. At first, it didn't hit me all at once. I wasn't the jealous type. I trusted Lauren. Hell, I had to. We'd been through too much together for me to question her now. But the more I heard Eric's name, the more I realized something wasn't right. Eric had become a constant presence in our lives. And it wasn't just the casual mentions anymore. It was almost as if she was trying to make me feel something. Guilt, maybe. Jealousy. But I wasn't going to give her that. There was a coldness in the air that I couldn't shake. It wasn't just the weather, it was something else. A tension that hung over the house like a storm cloud waiting to burst. I watched Lauren carefully. She was no longer the woman who would laugh with me over dinner. or hold my hand as we watched a movie. No, she was distant, as though I were no longer someone she needed to keep close. I knew she was planning something, and that thought gnawed at me, but I wasn't ready to make my move yet. The turning point came one night, a few days after her bombshell announcement. I was in my office, finishing up some work after a long day. I'd learned the hard way to keep my mind occupied, to throw myself into my projects, rather than dwell on what was happening at home. But that night, the door to my office creaked open, and Lauren's voice cut through the quiet. "I think we need to talk," she said. Her tone was different. It wasn't the coldness I had come to expect. It wasn't the smugness either. It was almost pleading. But I could tell it wasn't genuine. It was the kind of tone someone uses when they know they've screwed up, but they don't want to admit it. I didn't look up from my desk. "About what?" "About Eric," she said, stepping into the room. "I've been talking to him more lately. And I think you should understand that he's been really supportive of me." I felt my pulse quicken, but I didn't let it show. I couldn't let it show. Not now. Not when I was so close. "I see," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Is that right?" I just think you should know that he's helped me in ways you haven't." She took a step closer, her eyes searching mine for a reaction. "He's always been there for me, Damien." I was done pretending I didn't know what was going on. I didn't need to hear her words anymore. The truth was already laid out in front of me, clear as day. I had seen the way she looked at Eric, the way she spoke about him with such admiration, such longing. I had seen the subtle changes in their interactions, how he'd suddenly become the one to offer advice, to fill the void that I hadn't even known was there. It was all too clear now. I stood up slowly, pushing my chair back. My eyes met hers, and for a moment, we just stood there, neither of us saying anything. I could feel the weight of the silence between us. And in that silence, I made my decision. "I'm done talking, Lauren," I said, my voice low but firm. "You made your choice." For the first time, I saw something shift in her eyes. The smugness, the confidence, it was gone. In its place was something I hadn't expected: doubt. She didn't say anything. She just stood there, looking at me as if she were trying to figure out what I was going to do next. But I wasn't about to make it easy for her. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to grovel, or try to convince her to stay. If she wanted Eric, if she wanted to throw everything we had away for him, then let her. Let her have him. Instead, I smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It wasn't a smile of comfort. It was the kind of smile that comes from knowing something she didn't. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I was calm. I was in control. "I'm fine with it," I said, my voice even. "If you want to be with Eric, then go ahead. It's your life." She seemed taken aback by my calmness. I could see her searching for something in my face, something that would give her the satisfaction she was looking for. But she found nothing. Instead, I turned away from her, walking out of the room without another word. As I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, I could hear her behind me, moving through the house in the same calculated, cold manner she had adopted over the past few days. She wanted to see me break. She wanted to see me fight for her. But I wasn't going to give her that. I had bigger plans. I didn't know how long it would take for her to realize what was happening. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going down without a fight. And I wasn't going to let her destroy everything we had built, without making her pay for it. So, what's going to happen when everything I've worked for is at risk, and the people I trusted most have turned their backs? Will they win? Or will I finally make them pay for what they did? I know one thing for sure: this is just the beginning. What do you think I'll do next? Comment 1 if you think I'll take back everything. Comment 2 if you think I'm done. Let's see who's right. You have 10 seconds to comment. Start now. 10 and 9, 8, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you for taking the time to comment. Now, let's dive back into this thrilling story. I didn't expect it to hit me like this. After everything, after Lauren dropping the bombshell about wanting a divorce, after the cold, calculated way she told me she wanted out of our life, I thought I'd be fine. Hell, I thought I'd be relieved, maybe even a little happy. She made her choice, right? She was moving on with Eric, and I was free to go back to the life I built for myself. One without the constant weight of wondering if I was enough. But that wasn't it. There was something deeper, something gnawing at me from the inside out. It wasn't just about losing her. No, it was the betrayal. The fact that she had already given her heart to someone else, my best friend, no less. While I was still there, still trying to hold this whole thing together, it hit harder than I could have imagined. But this wasn't the time to break. I wasn't going to crumble, not in front of her. If she thought I would, if she thought I'd beg or plead or show any kind of weakness, then she didn't know me at all. I wouldn't give her that satisfaction. I wasn't going to make any rash decisions either. I'd been building a reputation, an empire, for years. I didn't get here by reacting on impulse. I got here by controlling the narrative. And that's exactly what I was going to do now. The days following that conversation were a blur. It felt like I was living in some twisted version of my life, where everything was familiar, but nothing was right. I kept my distance from Lauren. I went through the motions getting up in the morning, going to work, making sure the firm was running smoothly, but everything felt different. When I came home at night, it was like walking into a house I didn't recognize. The quietness, the tension. I could feel the weight of the silence between us, like we were both just waiting for something to happen. I watched her. I studied her every move, paying attention to the smallest details. Her phone, always within arm's reach, never far from her. She'd take it with her when she left the room, making sure I couldn't see the screen. There was a time when we didn't need to hide anything from each other. I used to be able to read her like an open book, but now, there was nothing but mystery, and that's what pissed me off the most. She thought she could get away with this, that she could just tear everything apart without consequences. I wasn't going to let that happen. I started digging. Not directly, not yet, but I knew that in situations like this, the truth always came to light, eventually. People talk. People make mistakes. And I had all the time in the world to let those mistakes come to the surface. I was patient. I always had been. It was part of the reason I was so good at what I did. I knew how to wait for the right moment, to take a step back and watch the pieces fall into place before making my move. I didn't need to act in haste. I didn't need to confront Lauren or Eric. I just needed to gather the information, to let them think they were getting away with it. One evening, after another cold and uncomfortable dinner where we barely spoke, I caught her slipping out. It was subtle, like she was trying to make sure I didn't notice, but I did. I noticed everything now. I watched her grab her purse, slip on her jacket, and leave through the back door. Not a word to me. That was strange. Lauren didn't just leave without saying anything, and when she returned a few hours later, she was different. She had that look on her face, the kind of look that said she'd been doing something she shouldn't have been doing. I didn't follow her that night, not yet. I wasn't ready. But I knew I would. I'd waited too long to act, and this was the sign I needed. I wasn't going to play their game anymore. I was going to take control of this situation. And I was going to do it in a way they would never see coming. The next day, I installed a small GPS tracker in her car. Just a little thing, easily overlooked, but enough to track her movements. I needed to know where she was going, what she was doing when I wasn't around. And then I started watching her more closely. The next time she left the house, I followed. I kept my distance, not wanting her to see me, but I followed her anyway, staying far enough behind so she wouldn't notice. I had an instinct for these things. I knew how to blend in, how to keep to the shadows. I had spent years in the business of observing people, figuring out what made them tick, what they wanted, what they were hiding. Lauren was no different. She didn't know it yet, but I was already ahead of her. Every move she made was being tracked. Every conversation she had was being documented. I wasn't stupid. I wasn't going to be the one left in the dark. She drove into the city, heading toward a part of town I didn't recognize. I followed her down side streets, careful to stay out of sight. Finally, she parked outside a boutique hotel. I didn't need to see anything more. I knew exactly what was going on. She wasn't just meeting anyone. She was meeting Eric. I couldn't prove it yet, but I didn't need to. The pieces were all there, falling into place. She was betraying me. She was betraying everything we built, and I was going to make sure she knew there were consequences. I parked a block away, watching as she stepped out of her car and into the hotel. I wasn't angry, not yet. I wasn't even surprised. But I was ready. I was ready to make them pay for underestimating me. The next few days were a blur of planning. I didn't let on that I knew. I didn't let on that I was watching, but every move they made, I tracked. Every word they spoke, I recorded. I had to be patient. I had to wait for the right moment, and I wasn't going to rush it. Lauren and Eric thought they were in control, that they had won, but they had no idea what was coming. I'd learned long ago that in situations like this, revenge isn't about acting on emotion. It's about strategy. It's about taking the time to plan, to gather the pieces, to watch as everything unfolds in front of you. And that's exactly what I was doing. I was setting the stage for something they would never see coming. I wasn't going to let them tear apart everything we had, not without making them understand the price of betrayal, not without showing them that I was not someone to be taken lightly. And when the time came, when everything was in place, I would strike. But not before. Patience was my greatest asset, and it was going to be the thing that brought them to their knees. I had to keep playing the game. I wasn't about to let them win. I'd given them space, let them think they were the ones in control, that they were just living their lives while I was falling apart. But I wasn't falling apart. I was building something that would make them regret ever thinking they could walk all over me. So I stayed calm, stayed distant. I watched Lauren, watched her make the same mistakes over and over, thinking she could outsmart me. I wasn't going to confront her yet. I wasn't going to make a scene, not when I knew I could get the upper hand. It was all about patience now. I needed to watch. I needed to make sure that when I struck, it would be with enough force to leave them shattered. And every move she made, every word she spoke, only brought me closer to that moment. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me squirm. She thought I was weak, thought I'd just roll over and accept it. She didn't know me, not the way she thought she did. There were little signs, little moments that told me exactly what I needed to know. Lauren had always been the kind of person who thought she could get away with anything. She thought the world owed her something, and I had spent so many years giving her everything she wanted, bending over backward, to make sure she had the best of everything. But when she thought I was blind to what she was doing, that's when I knew she had underestimated me. She thought I wouldn't notice how Eric was slowly creeping into every part of our lives. She didn't even try to hide it anymore. I couldn't help but laugh to myself when I saw her post another picture of herself with Eric. All smiles, holding hands like it was some big secret. It wasn't. Not to me. But I knew this wasn't the time to let my emotions get the better of me. No. I needed to stay one step ahead. I needed evidence. Hard proof that would leave them no room to wiggle out. I wasn't going to let them write their own narrative. I'd be the one telling this story. I hired a private investigator. Not because I didn't trust my instincts, but because I needed the hard facts. I needed everything on paper. All the pictures, the video footage, every single message that would leave them with no excuse. The investigator was thorough. He knew exactly what to look for. He started following them, making sure they never suspected a thing. I wasn't in a rush. I didn't need the truth now. I could wait. I could wait for them to think they had won. And when they did, when they were so comfortable in their lies, that's when I'd drop the hammer. Every day, I'd get updates, texts, photos, and reports. I could see everything. Eric taking her to fancy dinners, their weekend trips to hotels, the subtle touches they shared in public. They thought I didn't know. They thought I was oblivious. But every move they made was another piece of the puzzle falling into place. And with each new piece, my plan was coming together more perfectly than I could have hoped for. But it wasn't just about Eric and Lauren. It wasn't just about their affair. I had other moves to make. I wasn't about to let them get away with taking my life, my marriage, my trust. I needed to make sure that everything they had built would come crashing down. I wasn't just going after Lauren and Eric. I was going after everything they had worked for. Everything they thought they'd get away with. I started watching Eric more closely. I had always known him as my friend, my bro. We'd been through a lot together, had each other's backs for years. But now, he was nothing more than a traitor. I started digging into his finances, checking the records, looking for anything that might give me the leverage I needed. I knew how Eric operated. He was reckless, always chasing the next big deal, always pushing the limits. And I knew he had something to hide. I wasn't about to let that go unnoticed. The more I looked, the more I found. One shady deal after another. Deals that, if exposed, could ruin him. And the best part? I had everything I needed. All I had to do was wait for the right time to use it. Meanwhile, Lauren continued to walk around like everything was fine. She thought I had given up. Thought I was just going to let it all slide. She thought I was weak. But what she didn't realize was that I was watching her. Every step, every word, every action. She was digging her own grave, and I was standing right there, waiting for the perfect moment to bury her. It was almost too easy. She didn't even realize that I had already moved my assets. She didn't know that I had started pulling money out of joint accounts, shifting things around so that when the time came, she wouldn't have a leg to stand on. She thought she was in control, but I was the one pulling the strings. The night Eric and Lauren went out again, I knew it was time. I could feel it. I had all the pieces I needed. The investigator had delivered the final bit of evidence. A picture of them together, kissing, in a hotel room. I had everything laid out. Now it was just a matter of timing. Lauren still hadn't figured it out. She was still playing her game, thinking she was getting away with it all. But when she finally saw what I had, when I laid it all out in front of her, there would be no denying it. The truth would hit her like a freight train, and there would be no running from it. She could blame me, she could try to gaslight me, but the evidence would be irrefutable. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't devastated. I was done with that. Now, I was just playing the game, and the best part was, I wasn't playing to win anymore. I was playing to make sure they lost. Everything. It was all falling into place. Everything was aligning like I had planned. And I could feel the tension building. Lauren, Eric, hell, they thought they had the upper hand. But they were wrong. They were blind to the storm that was quietly gathering on the horizon. I had been patient. I'd bided my time, waiting for the right moment to expose them. Now, that moment was nearly here. Every day, I watched them, carefully, methodically. I didn't just wait for them to make mistakes. I watched them for the cracks that would inevitably form when they got too comfortable, when they thought they had all the answers. They made mistakes every time they took another step in their little game. The more I observed, the more I saw how they underestimated me. I wasn't the fool they thought I was. I wasn't going to just sit back and let them destroy everything we had built without consequences. That was never the plan. I started making my moves. Small ones at first, just to get the ball rolling. The first step was the financial accounts. I knew exactly how they were moving money. Lauren had always been too careless with her spending. Always looking for the next shiny thing. I made sure to pull the strings on our joint accounts, shifting things around before she could even notice. She had no idea that I had been preparing for this moment for months, securing everything I owned, everything I had worked for, and locking it away where she couldn't touch it. She thought the house was hers to take, the money was hers to spend. But she was wrong. I was moving quickly now. I had gathered everything I needed: financial documents, private investigator reports, pictures, text messages. The evidence was irrefutable. It wasn't just about proving an affair. It was about showing her that she had underestimated me in every way possible. I wasn't just going to let her walk away with my life. No, I was going to make sure she lost everything, just like I had. Every lie she had told. Every sneaky little maneuver she made to push me out of the way so she could get what she wanted now. It was all coming back to her. I watched Lauren one night, as she left the house again, her car pulling out of the driveway with that same look of satisfaction on her face. It was the look she always wore when she thought she was getting away with something. But this time, it wasn't the same. This time, I wasn't sitting around waiting for her to make the first move. No, this time I was in control. I grabbed my keys, slipped into the car, and followed her. Not too close, but close enough to keep my eyes on her. She had no idea I was behind her. She made her way to the same hotel, the same damn place she had been meeting Eric for weeks. I parked down the street, watching as she entered the building. There was no dramatic confrontation this time. No shouting, no tears. This was different. This was business. I didn't need to confront her. I didn't need to make a scene. I just needed her to keep making her mistakes. The more she thought she was winning, the closer she was to losing. The next day, I pulled up the security footage from the hotel. I had everything I needed. I watched them together, laughing, hugging, even kissing. I could see it all. Every last piece of evidence that would tear their world apart. I wasn't even angry. I wasn't bitter. I was calm. This wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about control. And it was mine. I had also been working on Eric. I knew his deals, his shady investments, the way he had been inflating his worth to keep up appearances. I had always been good at reading people, figuring out where the weak spots were. And I knew Eric was no different. He had always been reckless, chasing quick money, and pretending like he was on top of the world. But the cracks were there. All I had to do was make the right call. And I did. I had the proof of one of his illegal transactions, the kind of deal that could ruin him, make his entire career come crashing down. I made sure that piece of evidence got into the right hands. It was time. I wasn't going to wait any longer. I needed to confront Lauren, but not in the way she expected. I needed her to know what was coming before she even had a chance to react. I called her. Her voice, when she answered, was cold, like she was expecting a fight. But this time, I wasn't giving her the satisfaction of a fight. This time, I was just laying it out, plain and simple. "You've made your choice," I said, my voice steady. "And now, I'm making mine." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the sound of her breathing, slow, controlled, like she was trying to figure out how to play this. She wasn't prepared for this. She wasn't prepared for me to take control. "I'm done," I continued. "But you're not." "Not yet. Not until I'm done with you." I hung up before she could respond. I didn't need to hear her apologies, her excuses. They meant nothing now. She had already made her bed. Now it was time for her to lie in it. I spent the next few hours preparing. I set up meetings with my lawyer, made sure everything was in place. It was all coming together now. I wasn't just going to let them walk away with everything they had taken from me. I was going to make sure they paid for it. I wasn't interested in revenge. Not anymore. I was interested in justice. And I was about to make them see that I wasn't the man they could push around. When Lauren walked into the house later that evening, I was ready. She had no idea what was coming. And I wasn't going to give her the chance to turn the tables. This time, I was in control. And everything was about to change. I had spent weeks building the perfect plan, waiting for the right moment to make my move. I wasn't stupid. I knew how to play the game. And I knew that patience was the key. I had watched, I had waited, and I had gathered every bit of evidence I needed. But now, as the day drew closer to the moment of reckoning, I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on me. This wasn't just about exposing Lauren's betrayal, or ruining Eric's reputation. This was about taking back control. About showing them that they had made a huge mistake in thinking they could just walk away unscathed. And I was about to make them pay for every single misstep. The final pieces were in place. I had already put my affairs in order, had protected my assets, and knew exactly how I would move forward. The evidence I had on Eric would destroy him. His financial misconduct, those shady deals he had been pulling for years, wouldn't just damage his career. It would send him into a downward spiral that he wouldn't be able to climb out of. And Lauren? Well, she had no idea what was coming. She thought she had won. She thought that by making her choice and walking away from me, she would have the life she'd always dreamed of. But she was wrong. The night was closing in, and I could feel the tension building. Every move they made only pushed them closer to the edge. I wasn't going to confront them, not yet. That wasn't how this was going to unfold. I had spent years learning how to stay one step ahead, how to stay calm in the chaos. No, I was going to let them make all the mistakes for me. I was going to sit back and watch as they dug their own graves. Lauren had grown careless. I knew she thought she had the upper hand, that I was the one who was broken, the one who was losing everything. But what she didn't understand was that I wasn't afraid of losing her. I wasn't afraid of the life we had built together falling apart. What I feared most was losing control. And that was something I wasn't going to let happen. She had no idea that every word, every gesture she made was being carefully documented. The private investigator had sent me photos of her and Eric at that hotel again, this time holding hands in a public display that they thought was safe. But it wasn't. I had already known about their affair, but now, I had the proof. And I was going to use it to take everything from them. The following day, I called my lawyer and scheduled the meeting. I wasn't going to wait much longer. The time had come. Lauren had been walking around as if she had won, but she hadn't seen the trap I had set for her. She had no idea that I was just waiting for the right moment to turn the tables. I wasn't going to confront her directly, no, that would have been too easy. I was going to hit her where it hurt the most, her ego. I waited until she was home, until she had settled in for the evening, probably thinking she had the night to herself. She had no idea that I was about to turn her world upside down. As I walked through the front door, I didn't let the anger show. I didn't let her see the storm inside of me. I greeted her casually, like nothing had changed, like I wasn't about to destroy everything she thought she had taken from me. She looked at me, that same smug expression on her face, as if she were the one in control. "Can we talk?" she asked, like she hadn't already made her choice. Like she hadn't already thrown me aside like I was nothing. But I was done talking. There was no more room for words. She had made her decision, and now, it was time for me to make mine. "I think it's time we end this, Lauren," I said, my voice calm, steady. "You've made your choice. And now, it's time for me to make mine." She blinked, confused for a moment, probably thinking I was going to plead with her, beg her to stay. But I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. I wasn't going to fight for something that wasn't worth fighting for. No, this was about justice. This was about showing her that she had underestimated me, that she had miscalculated in the worst way possible. "I've already made my choice, too," I continued. "I'm not fighting anymore. You've got what you wanted. But I'm not done yet. Not by a long shot." She looked at me like I had lost my mind. But I didn't care. I knew what was coming. I could see the cracks in her facade already. She had been so sure of herself, so smug in her belief that she was in control. But I wasn't done with her yet. I had one more thing to say before she figured out what was really happening. "Enjoy your new life, Lauren," I said, turning to leave. "But don't expect me to make it easy for you." I walked out of the room, knowing full well that she had no idea what I was about to do. She thought she had everything figured out, thought she had all the power. But the truth was, I had been one step ahead of her the entire time. And now, the game was over. I knew this day was coming. It had to. I had built everything to this point patient, precise, calculated, and now, the moment was here. I could feel the tension rising in my chest, a knot that had been slowly tightening for weeks. It was time to strike. They thought they had won. Lauren thought she had taken everything from me, walking away without a second glance, acting like she had moved on to something better. She didn't realize it yet, but she had only dug herself deeper into the hole. Eric? He was just as blind. So sure of himself. So convinced that he had the upper hand. But I wasn't like everyone else they'd manipulated before. I wasn't going to let them tear everything down without making them pay. And I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I wasn't even mad anymore. I wasn't angry. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my life, about making sure they knew exactly who they had been messing with. This wasn't going to be a loud, dramatic showdown. No, that's not how I worked. This was going to be quiet. This was going to be methodical. The kind of payoff that only comes after you've been patient, after you've set the pieces in motion for long enough that your enemies have no idea what's coming until it's too late. Lauren didn't know I was already ahead of her. She thought I was broken, that I would be the one left in the dust while she went off with her lover, living the life she thought she deserved. But she didn't see what I had been building behind the scenes. She didn't know that every action she took, every lie she told, was being watched, being recorded. Every text message she sent to Eric, every little meeting at the hotel. I knew it all. I had the proof. I wasn't going to confront her yet. Not until I had everything in place. It wasn't just about them anymore. It was about showing them that they had underestimated me in every way. That they thought they could get away with it, without facing the consequences of their choices. I'd already protected myself, my assets, my business, everything that mattered. I had everything locked down, and now, it was time to flip the switch. I wasn't going to let them destroy me, and I wasn't going to let them destroy the life I had built. Not without making sure they were left with nothing. The first step was simple: the house. The home that Lauren thought was hers. The one she was so eager to claim after pushing me out. She didn't know it yet, but it wasn't actually ours. It was a corporate lease under my company's name, a loophole. I'd made sure to close long before she thought she had everything figured out. I had already set things in motion. The lease was expiring, and when the time came, I'd make sure the landlord reclaimed it. She would find out the hard way that the house she had taken for granted wasn't hers to keep. And when that happened, I could already imagine the look on her face, the shock, the confusion, the realization that nothing she thought was hers would stay in her hands. But that was just the beginning. I wasn't stopping there. No, the real game was with Eric. I had a much bigger move in mind for him. He had been playing fast and loose with his finances, thinking he could pull off one shady deal after another without ever facing the consequences. But I knew him too well. I knew exactly where to hit him. I had proof of one of his illegal transactions, something big enough to ruin his career and send him spiraling. He thought he was on top of the world, but I knew he was nothing but a house of cards. And all it took was one little push to make everything come crashing down. I wasn't the type to play dirty. I didn't need to get my hands involved. I had other ways of making sure the truth came to light. I had already reached out to the right people, those who could make sure Eric's dirty deals were exposed. It wouldn't be pretty. It wouldn't be a simple slap on the wrist. No, this was going to be the kind of exposure that would destroy everything he had built. And I wasn't going to stop there. I wasn't going to let him walk away from this. Not without feeling the weight of every single decision he had made. But it wasn't just about the money or the business. It was about the way they thought they could walk all over me. They thought they could take what they wanted without paying the price. But I wasn't going to let that happen. I was going to make sure they knew exactly who they had crossed. I wasn't going to do it out of anger or hatred, but because it was the right thing to do. It was about justice. And Lauren and Eric were about to learn the hard way that there are consequences to every action. The phone call came just after I had finalized everything. It was Lauren, calling to check in, to see if I had made any progress. She didn't realize what I was doing. She didn't know that I had already set the wheels in motion. "Have you found a new place yet?" she asked, her voice casual, like she had no idea what was coming. "I'm working on it," I replied, my voice calm. "But I'm not the one who needs to be worried." There was silence on the other end, followed by a nervous laugh. "What do you mean by that?" "You'll see," I said. "You'll both see." And with that, I hung up. The pieces were all in place. The trap was set. Lauren thought she had won, but she hadn't seen the storm coming. Eric thought he had outsmarted me, but he was about to crash and burn. And me? I was about to sit back and watch the whole thing unfold, knowing that I had already won. The days dragged on, each one feeling like an eternity. But I knew I was close. I had already set the plan in motion. My lawyer was ready, the paperwork was lined up, and every piece of evidence I'd collected was in place. The more I thought about it, the more satisfaction I found in knowing that this wasn't going to be some dramatic confrontation. No, this wasn't about that. This was about the quiet, inevitable collapse of everything they had built. The house of cards they'd so carefully stacked was about to fall. And I wasn't going to have to lift a finger to make it happen. All I had to do was wait for the right moment, and the rest would take care of itself. Lauren, with her smug confidence, still thought she had the upper hand. She had no idea what I was doing behind the scenes. She thought she was in control, but what she didn't realize was that I was 10 steps ahead of her. I had already started playing the game, but I wasn't going to show my cards yet. I wasn't going to let her see my hand. Not until it was time, and then, the first blow came. I'd been tracking the movements of the house. The lease I'd set up, the one Lauren thought was part of her victory, was about to expire. The landlord had already been notified. All I had to do was sit back and wait for the eviction notice to hit her. She thought she had won, that the life she wanted was just waiting for her at the doorstep. But what she didn't see was that the ground beneath her was already crumbling. The lease wasn't in her name. It was in mine. And when it was up, the house wasn't going to be hers anymore. It wasn't just the house. It was everything. I'd been watching Eric, too. The reckless way he'd been handling his business, the shady deals, the fraud. It was all about to catch up to him. I had already tipped off the right people. The investigators. The watchdog groups. The moment he made his next move, he wouldn't know who was pulling the strings. I had made sure his past would catch up with him in the worst way possible. I wasn't going to do anything dramatic, anything obvious. No, this was going to be like a slow, suffocating squeeze. The kind of pressure that builds up over time and eventually bursts. And when it did, it would be too late for them to do anything about it. I could already picture it in my mind, Eric's face, when everything he had built came crashing down. All the lies he'd told, all the people he'd manipulated, all the empty promises he'd made. Suddenly, they would all come back to haunt him. And Lauren? She would be standing right there beside him, watching everything she thought she had slipped through her fingers. I didn't have to do anything other than watch it all unfold. That's the beauty of it. They had underestimated me at every turn. They thought I was the one who was weak, the one who couldn't take a hit. But now, they were the ones who were vulnerable. They had made their choices, and they were about to pay the price. And then, the call came. It was from my lawyer. The papers were signed. The lease was terminated. The house was mine, once again. And Eric? His world was about to implode. The authorities had already started their investigation, and the evidence I had given them was enough to bring him down. It was all happening so fast now. Faster than I had expected. But it didn't matter. I wasn't about to stop. That night, I watched Lauren. She didn't know it yet. But she was about to face the consequences of everything she'd done. She was still acting like she had control. Still pretending that she was the one with the power. I knew she was going to try to turn things around. Try to paint herself as the victim. She always did. But this time, there was no turning back. She came home late that evening, her usual smile plastered on her face like she hadn't just signed her own fate. I didn't say a word when she walked in. I didn't need to. She could feel it. The air in the house had changed. The tension between us had shifted. She knew something was happening. She just didn't know what. Not yet. I sat in the living room, watching her as she walked through the door. She looked at me, expecting something, but I didn't give her the satisfaction of reacting. I just sat there, calm, steady, knowing that everything was already falling into place. "You okay?" she asked, but there was a nervousness in her voice now, something I hadn't heard before. "Yeah," I replied, not looking up from my drink. "I'm good. Just waiting." "Waiting for what?" she asked, stepping closer. I finally looked up at her, and for the first time in a long time, I saw the doubt in her eyes. The uncertainty. She had no idea what was coming. She still thought I was the man who would just fold under pressure, the man who would crumble when things got hard. But that wasn't me anymore. I had moved on. I had planned this out, and now, it was time for her to face the reality of it all. "For everything to finally catch up with you," I said, my voice calm. "For the truth to come out." She froze. The color drained from her face. She didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. The look in her eyes told me everything. She knew. And that was the moment I knew I had won. This was the beginning of the end for them. And they had no idea how far I was willing to go to make sure they lost everything. The aftermath came faster than I expected. It was as if everything I had set in motion, the months of planning, the careful preparation, finally collided into a single, undeniable truth. I wasn't ready for the exact speed with which things started to fall apart. But the beauty of it was that I had already set it up so well. I had let them think they were winning, let them believe they were getting away with it, only to watch everything they built collapse, right before their eyes. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I had reached a point where the satisfaction wasn't about revenge. It was about control. I had taken it all back, piece by piece, and now, I was watching it unfold as they scrambled to hold on to the life they thought they could steal from me. The house. I had to start with the house. The one Lauren thought she had won. The one she had walked into as if it was a prize. She had no idea that it wasn't even hers to take. That the whole time she had been planning her new life. I had been quietly waiting for the lease to expire. When I finally made the call to the landlord, it was a simple decision. A formality, really. I had made sure the papers were in place well before she thought she had outsmarted me. She had walked into her new beginning with that self-satisfied smile, believing everything was hers. But I had the last laugh. When the eviction notice arrived, she thought it was a mistake. She thought she could still call the shots. But that was the moment when the illusion shattered. The house wasn't hers. It never was. I watched it all happen from a distance, of course. I stayed out of it, kept my distance, let her do all the work for me. She got the notice, threw a fit, called her lawyer. She tried everything she could to fight it. But there was nothing to fight. The lease was in my name, and she couldn't get around that. The look on her face when she realized she couldn't keep the house? That was the moment when everything I had carefully planned came together. She was standing there, eyes wide, unable to believe that the ground had been pulled out from under her. She tried to argue, to yell, to make excuses, but it didn't matter. I had already won. And then there was Eric. I knew he was next. I had already set the pieces in motion for him too. His world was about to come crashing down just like hers. And it was even sweeter knowing that I didn't have to lift a finger to make it happen. The evidence I had on him was airtight financial records, illegal transactions, and shady business deals. He thought he could play the system, take advantage of people, cheat his way to the top. But like Lauren, he had underestimated me. I had already tipped off the authorities. They were watching him, waiting for him to slip up, and it was only a matter of time before they caught him. I wasn't the type to make a big spectacle of things. I didn't need to expose everything in one dramatic moment. No, I was going to let them experience the slow, suffocating weight of their actions. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't looking to lash out. I was just waiting for them to realize that they had made a huge mistake. When the investigation into Eric's business finally went public, when his name hit the news, I was watching from the sidelines, knowing that every step he took would lead him closer to the edge. The man had no idea how badly he was about to fall. And I wasn't going to be the one to push him. He was already doing that to himself. Lauren came to me a few days later, her desperation clear in her voice. I could hear it as soon as she walked through the door, her attempt to make me feel guilty, to make me think that maybe, just maybe, there was a way to salvage things. But there was no more room for her in my life. She had burned that bridge the moment she chose Eric over me. She didn't even get the chance to apologize before I stopped her. "You made your choice, Lauren," I said, my voice calm, unyielding. "You can't come back from this. You can't just tear everything down and expect me to help you rebuild it." She stood there, staring at me, as if waiting for me to change my mind. But I wasn't going to. There was nothing left to save. The damage had been done, and I wasn't about to let her use me to fix it. She had her chance, and now, she had to face the consequences of her actions. "I'm not here to beg," she said, her voice low. I need you to understand." But I already understood. I had understood the moment she made the decision to leave. She thought she could have it all, Eric, the house, the life she thought she deserved, but in the end, it wasn't her decision to make. It never was, it was mine. And now, she was left to pick up the pieces of the mess she had created. I didn't need her to apologize. I didn't need her to beg. I had already made my peace with everything. I had already let go of the past, of the pain she had caused. And now, all I had to do was sit back and watch as everything she thought she had built crumbled to the ground. Eric's downfall wasn't the last piece of the puzzle, though. No, it was just the beginning. The moment the truth about his shady dealings came out, people started backing away from him. Investors pulled out. Business partners cut ties. The web of lies he had spun over the years started to unravel. And I didn't have to do a damn thing. I had already set the wheels in motion, and now it was just a matter of letting it all play out. I didn't need to see them fail. I didn't need to rub it in their faces. I had already won. And the best part? I didn't have to raise my voice. I didn't have to shout or throw a fit. All I had to do was stand back, let them dig their own holes, and watch as they fell apart. And when the dust finally settled, I knew I would be standing tall. They thought they could take everything from me. They thought I would just sit back and let it happen. But I didn't. I fought back, and I won. And now, I had everything I needed to move on with my life. Free from the past, free from them, and finally, free to build the future I'd always wanted. Well, here we are. The moment I've been waiting for. You saw how everything started to crumble for them, but let me tell you what happens next will make your jaw drop. You won't believe how it all ends. It's not about revenge, it's about control, but who's really in control now? Stay with me, because I'm about to show you something that will leave you speechless. Don't miss it. The lesson here is simple. Never let anyone take your power. People will try to manipulate, deceive, and walk all over you. But if you stand your ground, protect your interests, and stay patient, you'll always come out on top. Life is a game of strategy, not emotion. Don't let betrayal define you, use it to fuel your comeback. Be smart, be prepared, and never let others decide your worth. In the end, you're the one in control.